Hi there, my name is Rebecca Starkham with the Junior League of Denver, and we are just going to do a little video on how to prepare what we need to make our masks. We're going to have a virtual mask making training on Monday, September 14th, and if you're in the Junior League of Denver, I hope you are able to join us. If you're not in the Junior League of Denver, then maybe this will help you make your own masks and get what you need together for your own masks. At first, I just wanted to show you my setup and let you know I don't have a huge space here. A lot of people were making masks on their dining room table, whatever surface you have available. So I'm just going to tip down so you can see my mask making, my sewing setup here. This is my sewing machine. It's just in a travel bag right now because I'm using the table as a cutting board right now. And you can see my cutting board is down here, and this is a 24-inch long cutting board, and so it's not a huge table, it's a small surface. You don't need a tremendous amount of space. And then we're going to come back up here, and the other item that we're going to be working with mostly today is the iron and the ironing board. So of course, if we're going to be making fabric masks, we need some fabric. And these are just some pre-cut squares that you can buy. I bought these at Walmart, but you can buy them at a lot of craft stores and a lot of fabric stores, and you can see the dimensions there. So 18 by 21 inch squares is what those come out to be, and just so you can see what that looks like right here. So the first thing that's really important for sewing a mask is that you prepare the fabric, and indeed, if you're sewing anything, you want to make sure you've properly prepared the fabric. And for making masks, what that means to me is I first take the fabric and I wash it in cold water. And the cold water just to make sure that the color has set and the color is not going to bleed out. And then the next step is I wash the fabric again in hot water, and the hot water is going to make sure that the fabric doesn't shrink any further. And that's really important with masks. Once you have the mask made, you want to make sure that it's not going to shrink, that the people who are wearing the mask can wash the mask and don't have to worry about it changing its shape as you wash it. So that's the most important thing, is to get your fabric, and you want your fabric to be prepared. And by prepared, I mean pre-washed. So that's a good heads up, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this video so far in advance. So once you've washed your fabric, then we get to come over and we get to make sure our iron is on. And so I'm just making sure my iron's been stagnant for a little while. And then we can come over here to the cutting board, and I'm going to show you how to cut the fabric for a mask. So first thing I want to do is, if you're custom making a mask, you can do that, and it's pretty easy. You take your measuring tape and you find the person you want to make the mask for, and I'm going to get a little technical with you on this, but the outer fold of your eye is also known as the outer canthus of your eye. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that measuring tape and you're going to measure from outer fold of eye to outer fold of eye, or outer canthus of eye to outer canthus of eye. So I just did that on me, and I'm getting approximately 7 inches. That might be a little generous. So what I've done is I'm actually cutting pieces of fabric, so they're about 7 inches wide. So here we'll go tip down and we'll see this cutting. So here's my cutting board. You don't have to have a cutting board, but it really does make life quite easy if you have one. If you don't worry about it. I also love to cut with a rotary cutter, but again, scissors work just fine. You just need some means to cut to cut. So you can see my piece of fabric here is about 7.5 inches wide. So that's what I'm working with, and that's what I've cut. So this is another piece that I had prepared. So this is about where you want to get your fabric ready to go and prepared. So we'll set that aside, and we're going to get there with this piece. So again, I started with an 18 by 21 inch piece. I just laid it down on my cutting mat. I measured out about 7 This piece is about 7 inches wide, so that's going to be good once you get the seams done. And then I used a nice straight surface and cut along with the rotary, but again, using fabric scissors is very helpful. And this is just my household's rule. This little ribbon or thread indicates that these are the fabric scissors and they're not to be used for anything else, because you want to make sure your fabric scissors don't get all gunked up with other things. So I cut the 7-inch wide piece of fabric, and then the next thing I did, just my own personal experience when I started making masks in April, or maybe it was late March, I don't remember. Some of the things like elastic and binding ribbon and even ribbon became very short in supply. So I learned how to make fabric ribbons. And fabric ribbons are, I think, quite beneficial on masks. One, you can adjust how tight they are so you can make sure that the mask fits your face without needing a piece of metal in the nose. And two, you can take your mask off easily to eat, and your mask doesn't fall down to the ground, you don't lose it, especially for kids who are going to school. It's nice to have that option where the mask just hangs around their neck, and they're not going to lose the mask if they're at lunch or they're on the playground. So I made a couple of fabric ribbons, and I was going to show you how to make one more. So my fabric ribbons, I took about 1.5 inches of fabric. So I'm just going to cut one here for you, and I'm going to iron it for you so you can see what we did. So take about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to just cut it with my rotary cutter. No, it's not quite. There we go. So this is one of the reasons why I absolutely adore working with a rotary cutter, because that was super easy. And then we're going to move over to the ironing table, and we're going to iron this. If you haven't, one more thing too, if you haven't sewn for a while, make sure you do some basic maintenance on your sewing machine. At the very least, make sure you oil it first. So I'm going to quick move my camera over here just so you can see what I'm doing on the ironing table or on the ironing board. So here's my strip of fabric. I'm going to run the iron over it, and maybe a little spritz of water. So my ribbon that I made here, let me just show you with the ruler. This ribbon is about 1/2 inch wide. So to get a ribbon that's about 1/2 inch wide, I fold my fabric up, and I'm not using pins because I've done this a couple of times and I'm pretty comfortable with measuring by eye, but you can certainly measure this and pin it just to make sure you're comfortable with your measurement. And then I just take the iron, and the iron gives you a really nice crease. Now, I hadn't sewn for a little while, and I forgot about the importance of ironing, and I'm very grateful. My husband bought me a very good iron as one of the early one of the early anniversary or birthday or Christmas presents. I don't know which one, but I'm very grateful he did buy me a very good iron. So you can just fold over one end and then the other end. If you want to make it nice and clean, you can actually make a smaller seam on one side, and then you can fold that over. So that's what I did here, is I folded it in half, and then I made about 1/4 inch hem, and then I just folded that in, and then I pinned it down. So whatever makes sense, whatever you're comfortable with, you just want to have that ribbon prepared. It'll just make life a little bit easier when you're sewing. And it's always good to think about how many masks you want to make and prepare the fabric in advance. And then when you sit down in the sewing machine, you can just run a bunch of masks through. So you can see I've got a couple of, this is a little bit wider piece, so this is probably a larger piece that's good for an adult. So let's see, that one's about 8. Oh, about 8.5 inches wide. Sorry, you couldn't see that. So this one you can see is a little bit wider than this other mask that I had prepared up. So maybe for a larger adult. And then you can go down in size a little bit. I want to say when I made kids masks, I made the kids masks maybe about 5.5 or 6 inches wide. Just have these pre-prepared pieces of fabric ready to go. So that way once you start sewing, you can just keep sewing a handful of masks at a time. So that's just a little bit about how to be prepared and how to have items ready to go. So you're going to want to have the fabric. And one more thing I did, you can see with the iron, is once I cut that piece, then I cut down, I folded down, that's probably, that's not quite an inch of a hem in there, but you can fold in and have both ends ready to go, and then fold it in half. And you can see I've got a nice crisp seam ready to go there, a crease in the fabric. So that's all good and that's ready to go. We are going to do accordion style masks, so you'll end up putting a few folds in there. And then the other thing I like to do, I've put the hem in on both sides because I'm going to leave this open as a pocket in case you want to put a filter in of some sort. So that's just everything you need to prepare. So I'm just going to run through my list here with you and make sure that you've got everything you need and you feel comfortable. So on my list, I have fabric. Of course, we're going to need the fabric to make the masks. Thread, make sure you have plenty of thread around. That kind of coordinates with the fabric. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially if you are going to be sewing a number of different masks that have different color schemes. Then you can choose to do white or black or whatever is going to be the most coordinating. You're going to want to have scissors handy. As I said, sewing scissors are helpful. You want to make sure they're nice and sharp. Pins, always nice to have those pins handy so that you can pin your fabric as you go along. If you can find the elastic or ribbon, if that's easier for you, then go ahead and pick some of that up. It also is good to have a measuring tape. So this is the classic tailor's tape that is flexible and you can bend around. But if you just have a ruler handy, that works too, just some means to measure. And then one other piece, I don't know if you're going to need this or not, but I always like to keep a lint roller handy. I have a dog and 3 cats. When you're sewing, you get little threads of fabric hanging around, so you want to make sure that you can get that cleaned up. You of course need a sewing machine, and again, I can't recommend enough, make sure that you've done necessary maintenance on your sewing machine. So if you need to oil it, to make sure it's oiled, look up how to do that and get your machine oiled. And I would also recommend, if you haven't sewn for a while, go ahead and just grab a couple of pieces of scrap fabric and just run a few straight lines. All we're going to be doing is sewing straight lines, so there's not going to be any curves or any tricky angles, but just practice and make sure you're comfortable with the seams before you get on board. And last but not least, an iron and an ironing board, just so you can get that fabric ironed and get those nice seams and hems in so that you're ready to go. And we will see you on Monday, September 14th. That is going to be an in-person video training. I might come back here and make one more, hey, here's how we made the masks, just in case there's some people who aren't going to be available to join us for that training. But I want to make sure that I'm available in person for people who are sewing and haven't been sewing masks for a while. So that's why we're doing a live virtual training on September 14th. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for taking a little time out of your day to watch this video, and I will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.